I'm Brad DeRoche. Welcome to my series on guitar fundamentals. This is lesson number 25, and the focus of this lesson is on tremolo. Tremolo is a technique that is common for guitarists, and most of you have probably already tried it, and some of you may have already perfected the craft. But for most of us, it requires a lot of work and over a long period of time usually. So let's take a look at some of the common fingerings and some of the common pitfalls in learning tremolo technique. To begin with, most common tremolos are four-note groups, such as this. So it typically starts with a bass note, and then there are three repeated notes that come after that. So in this particular example, I'm playing a C bass note, just holding a C major chord in the left hand, and then playing on the first string, ring, middle, index. So it's P, A, M, I, P, A, M, I, P, A, M, I. Now that fingering is the most common one and perhaps the best one for tremolo, and it should be something that you practice on a regular basis. Now what you could do is look at the Giuliani 120 studies for guitar, and there's a perfect example of this. If you look at number 100, it's that P-A-M-I, well, his fingering is actually not P-A-M-I. I believe it's M-I-M. But that was kind of before tremolo was popular. Giuliani's a little ahead of the era there. So what I was doing here was playing the first string tremolo, A-M-I, A-M-I, while I arpeggiated the bass notes. Now, doing this at a slow tempo is really not that hard to do. Most people can do it quite well at a slow tempo. But here's what I would recommend that you try to work on with tremolo. There's about 6 different problems that tend to pop up for most people in their playing. The first one, what we have to learn to do is to bring out the treble note, the melody note. So that means we have to play A-M-I with a fair amount of power most of the time. That brings up the second thing, which is to help the tremolo to stand out, we need to reduce the amount of sound that we make with the thumb. Now this is easier said than done. To play the thumb really lightly and hit AMI pretty hard is very tricky. What you could try is to hit the flesh part of the thumb instead of the nail. So if you get the flesh involved, right, it tends to mute the basses and it makes the treble stand out a little bit. But I still would work on both. I would work on making the treble louder and the basses quieter. And you can do that either through just playing them with less power, or try switching over and just using the flesh part of the thumb, and it will soften the bass notes quite a bit. Then, one of the trickiest things to do is to get an even sound on the 3 treble strings, on the 3 repeated notes on the treble string. I believe one of the most common problems for people is that middle and index tend to come too close to each other. So we can usually get a good separation between ring and middle. And then for me, anyway, and I believe most people, middle and index get sort of pulled together as one finger almost. And so my index finger is on the string too soon. All right, so you can hear it. It cuts the second note off, the middle finger note. So in order to even out the sound, what I have to do is I have to consciously delay the first finger. Now I do this, and this may not be the best technique for everybody else, but I actually lift this finger a little bit up higher before I play. And that delays it so that it doesn't come too soon and hit the string and cut off the middle note a middle finger note too soon. So anyway, trying to get an even sound on the notes is extremely difficult to do. So that involves timing, and it's making sure that the timing is exactly the same on all fingers. Now, one of the things that you could do with this that I think is a really great exercise is you can start with different fingers. So you could try this little exercise starting with the thumb, as you would normally do in most tremolos. So that's on the beat. Then you could start with the ring finger on the beat. So it starts on the beat, and the thumb becomes the last note. Then start with middle finger. That's tricky. And so on. All right, very challenging to do that. Something I have to think about. It's hard to talk and do that at the same time. And then lastly, starting with index finger, I, and then thumb, A, and I. All right. You get the idea. All right, so that's one way to practice it, is starting with each of the different fingers and putting that on the strong beat. Now, I like to make rhythm sort of an inherent or bodily response, and so I'm nodding my head with that to help me know where the beat is. That's a bit exaggerated. I don't think I'd want to do that in a concert. It would be a little ungainly. So anyway, but try to feel that so you know where the pulse is. And it really helps to make that exercise a lot easier. Anyway, by accenting the first note, it really gives you more control over the fingers, and so that helps us to make it even. That helps to give us the fourth thing, which is even meter, and that's part of what I talked about with the even sound also. Even sound and even meter. Now, one of the things I would do is I would definitely practice this with a metronome. Metronomes are extremely handy when it comes to learning to play tremolo and making sure we're staying at pace. So here's pulse at 60. You could start out slower than that. You don't have to start at that speed. Now that's for a quarter note. So that's actually for 2 bass notes, 2 thumb notes per beat. So I'm slowing it down here a little bit so we can hear it. Now this would be at 50, or with the 8th note, the pulse at 100. So it gives you a sense of where that would be. Now, to play most tremolos at full tempo, you need the pulse to be probably in the 70s up to 80. So it would range in there somewhere, anywhere between, say, 72 and 80. And that's for a full speed tremolo if you're going to play Recuerdos or some of the Barrios pieces or something like that. Then, one of the other problems that I run into, the 5th thing to think about, is right hand clicks. Now this happens more commonly for me when I'm playing on the 2nd string, which is actually where I recommend you do most of your tremolo work. So the Giuliani studies are great, but I think he missed an opportunity to have us practice tremolo if he had just moved the melody note to the 2nd string instead of the 1st string. 1st string, you can kind of develop almost a bad technique because you can come from anywhere to hit that 1st string and it's no problem. But once you start practicing tremolo on the 2nd string, it gets a lot trickier. So that's where I spend most of my time, is practicing on the 2nd string. Now I heard one of those. I don't know if you could hear that. There. That was a really pretty nasty click with my index finger smacking the string. There's a couple more. You can probably hear those, hopefully, through the video. What's happening there is my nail is actually contacting the string really at the same time as the flesh, and so it's clicking, and on these modern guitars like this Daman guitar, you really hear those things probably more prominently than on a traditionally braced guitar, but nonetheless we have to work to get rid of them. And so what I do there is actually try to start a little bit further back. I have to adjust my right hand a little bit, and so I pull my fingers back this way a little bit, so I'm starting with a little bit more flesh. And that helps me to get rid of clicks. So the clicks were a major problem when I did a recording recently. I could really hear them coming out very prominently in the recording, and so it helped me to understand that I needed to do some more work with my technique. I wasn't really hearing them when I was practicing it. I had my filter on. I was filtering out those clicks, and so I want to make you aware of it so that you don't have those same problems. All right, so anyway, it brings us up to the sixth issue when it comes to tremolo, and that is bringing the tempo up all the way up to somewhere around 80. With this, what I recommend for most people, you're going to start around probably 50 or so. That's usually a good place to start. Or if you want to do eighth notes, you could you just double it. So you would do 100, and then that way your thumb lands on every eighth note. Let me just give you an example of that really quick. So here's tempo of 100, and so this is for the eighth note now. All right, so you could practice either quarter notes or eighth notes. I think eventually you want to play with quarter notes and let that be your pulse instead of eighth notes. But anyway, start somewhere around 100 and work your speed up. Most people run into a brick wall somewhere around 110, 112, 115 maybe, where they feel like they can't go any faster and things start to gallop and all of that. If you take care of some of the other problems that we talked about, eventually you will break through that barrier. But it has to be done with the right technique. So just going faster, just for the sake of going fast, doesn't really help. You have to take care of getting enough volume, making sure the index finger doesn't land too soon to cut off the middle finger note, reducing the bass, bringing up the trebles, getting an even sound, getting an even meter, getting rid of clicks. All of that stuff has to be done at a reasonable tempo before you expand up into the faster tempos. All right, let me show you a couple of quick varieties of tremolo that a few people use, and you can maybe add these to your practice technique. One very famous person, Anna Vidovich, does this with middle and index. Instead of AMI, she does PMIM. I believe it's MIM, not IMI. P. And it sounds really nice. For me, I can't get it fast enough to get up to a proper tempo. She does. She's an incredible player, and so she makes that work. It's a legitimate way to practice it. You could try that if AMI doesn't work for you. And then lastly, I'd like to show you very quickly a 5-finger tremolo, which is common in flamenco music. It starts out with thumb, then it goes to index next. So P-I, then A-M-I. So it adds an index finger between thumb and ring. All right, so P-I-A-M-I. So it's 5 notes in the group. P-I-A-M-I. Not getting a very good sound, but you get the idea from it, hopefully. So that's another one that you could try out to add to your tremolo technique practice. Anyway, I hope this helped you a little bit, gave you some ideas for working on tremolo. So remember the things that you have to take care of in each one: bringing out the treble, reducing the bass, getting an even sound and an even meter on the treble notes, and reducing right-hand clicks and bringing your tempo up to a reasonable pace. All right, until next time, practice well. We'll see you in the next lesson. Cheers.